I'm going to talk about airborne IP effects in airborne EM data. Well, I should say IP effects in airborne EM data and their application towards exploration. As Ellen said, lots of this work that I'm presenting today is based upon a project we're doing with the Geological Southern Queensland and Matthews Group. All right, so let's start with some semantics. IP or airborne IP has been a bit of a hot word over the last few years. It's important that we put in the right context and we don't oversell it, I reckon. So normally IP refers to ground electrical methods, obviously widely used in exploration. However, in dispersation, it's a physical process associated with a frequency-dependent resistivity. Now, there is evidence in airborne EM data that requires a frequency-dependent resistivity to explain that data. And based on that assumption, I think it is fair to call these phenomena airborne IP. It is important, though, to realize that they take place at frequencies much higher than the ground. It doesn't give exactly the same information about the subsurface as the ground IP does. It's likely associated to sources which are different from those produced by the ground IP center of anomalies. However, it can be complementary to ground IP. It's not the same. Very important to keep in mind. Now, the evidence that calls for a frequency-dependent resistivity, hence IP, is the fact that if in a central loop helicopter time domain system, you have a reversal of sign, you can only explain that allowing the resistivity to be varying over frequency, hence to call upon IP effects. Now, so this is a sign change. You actually don't see it go negative because it's a log plot, so the negatives roll back up. Now, in this case, you're lucky because you actually see a sign change and unmistakably you know there is an IP effect. However, that negative may never develop, either because you hit noise too early or because you don't sample late enough or because of all sorts of reasons that will become more evident as I keep talking. Now, these transients on the right-hand side, they too represent IP effects. This guy here never changes sign. Nonetheless, this is an IP effect. And this guy never changes sign either because it starts and finishes negative all the way. And I'll try to explain to you how this can happen as a consequence of a combination of the physical properties of different layers in a layered approach. These are all different types of IP effects on real data I've seen on different systems over the years. There's actually many more now. Basically, if you don't model IP, the only thing you can do is get rid of all this data, all the negatives, and then hope that there will be enough. Unfortunately, your hopes will not get answered because simply taking away the negatives doesn't take away the entire IP effect from the airborne EM data because the transients do get distorted severely before they go negative. And even just taking away the negatives and inverting it with a normal non-dispersive code is not going to give you the right resistivity. Now, as I said, one more slide, ground IP and airborne IP are not the same thing. And the most important reason for that is that, let me see if I can bring a laser. Yeah, the most important reason is the frequencies at which they operate. You know, ground IP usually operates at these frequencies around here. Airborne EM based IP measurements operate at these frequencies out here. I should also mention, should have mentioned earlier, that what I'm talking about are not ad hoc customized airborne EM system geared for modeling IP. These are standard airborne EM systems, the VTEM, the SkyTEM, the Tempest, even though that's a different story. You know, these are standard systems that do capture IP effects as they fly. So these standard systems usually operate at 25 Hertz or a little bit lower, but they sit around here. So what that means is that they physically cannot excite anything that sits around here, which arguably is what is where the most economic type of deposits sit. Now, to me, that is not good enough a reason not to worry about IP here because, as I said, this what we measure here does carry geological information, most likely associated with alterations, some of which could be associated with mineralization. And also what is not economic now may end up being economic tomorrow. And at the end of the day, even if you don't care at all about IP, once it's in your data, you better deal with it, otherwise the connectivity will be wrong. Nonetheless, there is no hiding that we do need to do much more work about what the sources of these IP effects that we capture in airborne EM are. Okay, so let's get to the exploration world. Why does this matter? Because airborne IP effects are most likely way more often present in airborne EM data than you think. It may be because I'm sort of an expert in this, but lots of the airborne EM data that end up on my desk actually have IP effects. And once they're there, they always represent either an opportunity or a problem to exploration. It all depends on if and how you deal with them. When they're present, they need to be taken into account. But airborne IP modeling is expensive, so they only need to be done where it is needed, because if you do it where you shouldn't, you're throwing away your money, your time, and it can actually be counterproductive from a modeling perspective. If one does model airborne EM data accounting for IP, that yields chargeability models and IP-corrected resistivities and IP-corrected resistivity voltages if one wants to interpret on voltages. A little bit on the physics now. IP in airborne EM data has been around for a very long time, since the late 70s and early 80s. And those guys back then, they realized that what you measure in the receiver is given by the sum of the contribution of the standard EM currents and IP currents. So we're not inventing anything here. But what we're doing that they couldn't do back then because of lack of computational power, we are realizing that by playing with layers of resistivity, hence geological layers, and putting those into these modeling exercises, all of a sudden the presence of IP effect becomes much larger and more frequent than what they realized back then, because back then they were only using house spikes, homogeneous house spikes. So the presence of resistive bedrock greatly increases measurable IP effects. This is relatively new realization. And the other one, which is very big to me, it's kind of mind-blowing for a geophysicist, is that once you do have IP effects, the relationship between voltage, time, and depth doesn't hold anymore. So diffusion depth relationship doesn't hold anymore, and this has very big consequences. I could talk for 3 days on this. I chose to try to bring to your attention just some of these points of discussion. So I'll talk about the effect of layering now, which is very, very important. I'll start doing that with homogeneous half spaces first. And you have 2 forward responses in here of a Vitam-like system. The only difference between these 2 forward responses is that in one case, the half space has got 0 chargeability, in the other one has got 300 millivolts volt, or 0.3 if you rather use the small m for chargeability. You can see they never go negative. Nonetheless, the transient is distorted severely beyond errors by the presence of this chargeable stuff, which immediately explains what I said earlier, that if you took this transient here and you model it without taking IP into account, you wouldn't obtain a homogeneous half space of 100 ohm meters. You would obtain, if you're lucky, a 2-layer model with a thin conductive layer in the top and overly resistive bedrock below, and that would be wrong. Now, the next slide will show the effect of putting a resistor bedrock below this chargeable unit. This is what happens. So the amount of chargeable stuff hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed, or if anything, there is less, because it now stops at 50 meters. The one thing that did change is putting a resistor below, and the transient goes from that to that, and now it does go negative. Another important thing, basically, the only place where chargeability, where IP currents can develop is in the near surface, is in this first layer, because that's the only place that actually hosts something that can charge up. Now, nonetheless, the entire transient, as you can see, is negative, which means that all the information, the vast majority of the information keeps coming from the near surface. You basically don't have information at depth anymore. And why is that? Because the contribution of the eddy current from depth coming from this resistor is not strong enough to overpower the contribution of the IP current. We call this the airborne IP trap, in the sense that in this kind of situations, the bulk of information that you record in a voltage receiver is bound from the chargeable layer. I'll show you a couple more of synthetics. I think they're very important and very graphical in the explanation. And this set of full responses aims at showing you the effect of IP effect of a shallow chargeable layer onto a deep conductor. So this is a simple 3-layer model. I've got a chargeable cover. This could very well be your weather regolith across 2/3 of Australia, I guess. Then you have a non-chargeable resistive second layer, and then you have the non-chargeable conductive basement. Arguably, this could be the very reason why you wanted to fly airborne EM to begin with, to find these guys down here. Now, this is a 3-layer model, and I'm going to show the response in B field and BDT. On the right-hand side is what you measure. So the closed circles are positive, the open squares are negative. This is what you measure, and it's given by the sum contribution of the standard EM currents on the left-hand side and the IP currents in the middle. So the IP currents are always negative, the EM currents are always positive. On the left-hand side is what you would have measured in absence of anything chargeable. So basically in absence of chargeability in the first layer. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is bring this deep conductor closer and closer and closer to surface over the next slide. You can see that now it's buried at 1,030 meters, and you don't see the effect of that deep conductor anywhere. Keep your eyes on the right column here, either the B or the BDT, and you will see things changing at late times. So I'm going to move on to the next one. Now I brought it a little bit closer to the surface, and you can see changes in the transient above noise level. Now at 700 meters, the B field has jumped back to positive, which means that at this time the overall contribution of the eddy currents from the deep conductive basement have overpowered the contribution of the shallow IP currents, only in B, not in the BDT. The BDT happens a little bit later, as expected. Now you see these double sign changes. These actually are real, and you can see them in real data, and I have an example of those later, I believe. And then I'm going to bring it closer and closer and closer to the surface. Of course, the IP part of it never changes because it can't. There's nothing changing in terms of chargeability. Now, I'd like to reiterate attention to the fact that, you know, if all you were interested in was your deep conductor, you know, a slowing of decay rate at late times, so, you know, your tower maps and stuff that can be associated with better conductor. Without IP, you'd be looking at that. With IP, you look at that. So this obviously kills your interpretation if that's how you go about it. I'm going to bring it closer and closer and closer until this situation here, where basically the conductor is close enough and strong enough that you hardly see the effect of the IP, and here you don't see it anymore. Okay, so I hope that by now this already convinced you that it is a great deal once IP effects are in the data and you actually need to model them. Now I'm going to show you what happens if you do not model them. Okay, if you don't model them, you can end up with very wrong results in the conductivity. So you can end up with fake isolated conductors, whereas in reality it should look like that. This is the conductivity one obtains if one models a IP at the same time as chargeability. This is chargeability, this is conductivity, and these are continuous shales horizons. That this is how they should look. This is nothing but a geological layer. In reality, if you don't model AP, you would look at them like that. So this will give you a false positive drilling target. Another example, again in the top, if you don't model AP, this is resistivity, beautifully isolated conductive target. In reality, it should look like that. And you get to that if you actually model chargeability at the same time. So if one doesn't model AP, many things can happen. The bedrock conductor you're after, they may actually disappear. It didn't show that, but that can also happen. You can also get many isolated promising anomalies, which are all artifacts. You may underestimate thickness of the conductive chargeable layers severely and overestimate their conductivity. You may severely underestimate depth to basement and its conductivity. And if your exploration model happens to go by a geological model, that geological model will be most likely completely skewed in terms of geometries and absolute physical properties in ways that are also fairly hard to predict. And on top of that, you also throw away a free extra parameter, free, quote unquote, which would be your chargeability. Now, I'm going to show you a few case studies very quickly before I jump into Isa. Just a note about how we model AP. It's a very recursive exercise. There is no machine learning, there is no magical button. You actually have to sit with the data and think a lot about it because there's many things that go into it. But anyway, data processing feeds back with communication with the contractor's back office very often because what they do, you know, how they take away bias and things like that can have a huge effect on how the AP effect looks like. Then you have to take geology into account, then you take modeling, and then you go back, run and run in circles, and then you have your final output. I'm going to start with a simple, with the first example from a SkyTEM survey from a tropical area. The goal of the area was to see how things looked if one put the airborne IP glasses on. So basically, we modeled this with IP, and this is a chargeability cube. Now, I'd like to draw your attention to the depth scale here. This thing actually goes down to 700 meters, the entire cube. And we actually have some chargeable stuff down to 250 meters. I'm going to slice this. This is the outer surface at 100 millivolt volt. And I got a nice shape to it. This is 200 millivolt volt. And this is 300 millivolt volt. Then I'm going to show you the associated resistivity cube that was obtained at the same time, and we're going to slice that. So this is the outer surface of something more conductive than 300 millimeters, 200 millimeters, 100 millimeters, and then you put them side by side, and you end up with these features here. So these are the outer volumes of chargeability and resistivity. And some feedback from the client is that the AP inversion was actually useful for the drilling program, and high chargeability zones could be explained by presence of the semantic sulfide. However, mineralizations seem to correlate most with intermediate conductivity and chargeability rather than the maximum. And this may bring me back to the previous comment about, you know, what is it that airborne AP is actually measuring. Okay, another example from Australia you may be familiar with. This is Lewis Pond in the Lachlan Belt. And the reason I bring this one is that I've got a nice geological cross-section and ground IP models to compare it against. I'll just show this section here. So in the background you have geology, some drilling, this is mineralization here. And these gray and green areas here are areas of alteration, different types of alterations. In the forefront you have airborne EM-based chargeability model, and you have a halo here of increased chargeability that does correlate spatially with alterations. This is how we fit in the data, and then I'll show you a comparison against a ground-based chargeability model. So on the left-hand side, you have the result of 3D inversion of ground IP dipole-dipole survey. at 85 meters, and on the right hand side you have airborne-based chargeability model sliced at 85 meters. There are some spatial correlations and there are some differences, as one would expect. If one zooms up and takes a closer look at the areas where a Lewis point is, you can actually see some spatial correlation across the two different chargeability models. Very quickly, TKC, this is a kimberlite in Canada. The reason I bring this one up is that we have comparison against lab-based IP effects. So there are lots of negatives in here. So we inverted with IP. This is resistivity slice. This is chargeability slice against the geological model. This is how we fit the data. The entire thing is negative. We fit it. These are, again, ISO volumes of conductive and chargeable stuff. And then based on those, we produce this model here, which is based on physical properties obtained from airborne data. And if you compare it against the geological model obtained from drilling, this is for DO18 compared to that. This is for DO27 compared to that. They are similar to some degree. And in terms of hard numbers, these are the lab-based measurements in cold models obtained from core for the pipes, and this is based from the airborne from the same faces of the pipes. So from the lab, you obtain 81 and 49 meters. We obtain 100 and 150 in terms of chargeability, 540, 337, 260, 280. In terms of tau, this is important, 40 and 100 microseconds. We've got 100 and 180, and the C parameter is a little bit further away. The reason for this is why I'm showing this, because it actually says we are in the right ballpark, even though one was measured on core in the lab and the other one from the air. And now to Isa. Please let me know if I'm over time. This will take 5 minutes. Okay.
No, keep going, Andrea.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, before we get to Isa, one word about this newly developed airborne IP scanner, which was deployed in Isa. So, as I said, there is virtually every airborne dataset can have IP effects. So we developed, after painfully processing and inverting all that we had for nearly a decade now, we tried to be a little bit smarter. So we came up with fairly robust methodology for assessing where IP effects are present in the data, which we call the airborne IP scanner. And it rests on very detailed assessment of the data space and rigorous assessment of a small portion of the model space. It's a combination of those. I can't go into details. Those who are interested can talk to me later. There is a paper in the writing right now on exploration to physics. But this was used in Isa to allow management decide where to deploy the IP conversion. Thanks to Matthew for this introductory slide. So this is the Isa VTEM project, close to 16,000 line Ks at 2 Ks apart. Yeah, it was aimed at promoting exploration in the shallow cover. And basically, we got involved because there is IP in the data and they wanted to see if that affects their basic understanding in terms of conductivity, but also in terms of geology. Also, to this date, only CDI, so inflow type of a product had been developed. So we came in to do layered earth versions with IP where needed and present. So on the left-hand side, geology, you guys, all of you know this geology better than me, so I'm not going to make a fool of myself. In the middle, you have depth debasement. And on the right-hand side, you have the result of this airborne IP scanner. And basically what this is, everywhere you see blue, you have no IP in the data. You don't have to worry about it. Everywhere you see something that's not blue, you do have IP in different degrees. Now, something that's more red doesn't mean you've got something more chargeable, doesn't mean you have something shallower or deeper. It just means that the combination of layering made it more apparent in the data. but until we invert, we won't know how deep it is, what it is, what's associated with it. It's just a warning in there. If you don't model IP, your resistivities will be wrong. So the IP affects about 50% of the area. Obviously, it has got very strong geological constraints, and yeah. So we set sail to do that. This is an example of data. Red meaning negatives. Again, it's a log scale, so it was brought back up. This is an example of resistivity obtained whilst modeling IP. This is chargeability. Again, they're obtained at the same time. And the black wiggle is the data misfit that Yusen also talked about. And this shading here is a depth investigation, also Yusen introduced. This is just a line to show you how we fit the data. So the arrow bars are the measured data, the continuous line are the foreign model associated with these two quantum models, and we fit the data very well. Up to now, we have done about 50% of the whole area that had IP on it, and that's all I'm going to show you today. Only the parts with IP. We're somewhere around here. And this is a general view in 3D of what we're obtaining in terms of resistivity if we do model IP over the area. The main faults are well imaged with sharp resistivity contracts. Some faults are linked to non-mineralization. Sometimes, for example, the Corella River fault, they are characterized by a local linear conductivity increase. I'm going to show you another view from here. This is the same 3D view from the south, and the Dougal River mine is over the conductive, nearly vertical black shale in there. And then I'm going to zoom in onto a couple of the sections. Now, this is comparison between line 1600 and the final part of cross-section AB reported in the Cloncurry sheet with the same vertical scale. So we have confirmation on the Kulala and Montrose B fault. The conductive response of the siltstone and black shales, the PPC, is well imaged, well resolved. Same as the PKC3S, the black shale, which are the host of the Dougal River deposit. There is a good agreement between the main resistivity contacts and the geological contacts, all of them dipping westward. Now, this was done by my colleague Antonio, all this geological interpretation, so thanks to him. This is closing in even more. And again, you basically see a hell of a lot of structure in here. It's a beautiful data set. I'm sure Matthew's team can play with years in this. Few things worth discussing. The faults are well inferred. Some of them were known, some of them are inferred. The shales, the PPC, are well delimited by two nearly vertical faults. The dashed red line is an inferred fault that causes the deepening of PPC to the west. Also worth noticing the conductor response of black shale that hosts the Dougal River. And then important, the good resolution of the resistive granitic batholith, the PGU. Now, the fact the chargeability seems to be mainly shallow is not a surprise. It's probably most likely mainly associated with weathering, even though in some places it does reach about 100 meters. Another comparison on another line, much more resistive line. And basically, by applying the AIP modeling, we can actually resolve features within the resistive domain that would have been completely impossible without modeling IP. So these faults, these map faults, they can actually be seen in there. And the eastern edge of the Corella River fault is well imaged as a sharp resistivity contrast. Now I'm going to show you a comparison between what we are achieving and what was the state of the art before. So again, this is resistivities we are obtaining if we do this layered earth inversion with airborne IP modeling. We compare it against the CDIs. So this was what was available earlier. The CDIs are different for two reasons. First of all, the conductivity depth transforms are not real inversions, are not based on accurate layered earth full responses. They're based on thin sheet approximations. They're very, very fast. And also they don't model IP. So if I flick forth and back, you'll see, I think, a world of difference between the two. And obviously very, very big difference over resistant domain, but also in general, also over the conductive domains. Then I have some close-up. These are resistivities we're obtaining from model IP. This was the CDI without IP. And if I zoom in even closer, Again, this is the type of interpretation that Antonio was managed to derive from our new versions versus overlaid over the CDIs. How am I doing with time, Helen?
You're pretty over time, but that's all right.
Okay, then no, it's okay. I just wanted to show you one more example very quickly from Australia. This is from South Australia, just showing how material the difference from an expression perspective can be if one does model IP or if one doesn't. Thanks to Chris Wanson from First Quantum for sharing this. So basically, this is resistivity attained if you don't model IP. This is resistivity attained if you do model IP somewhere. And the big difference here is this. Now, if you don't model IP, you end up with this thin conductor layer over resistive basement here. And according to Chris, this could very well be a drilling target because it would be the first conductor layer above the oxidation zone. Whereas in reality, it actually looks like that. So this is just a geological layer of shale. So they avoided drilling that. I'm gonna jump to this last slide. This is probably one of the most intriguing chargeability anomaly on its own that we found in that area. So it's whacked against a fault, a nice-looking chargeable anomaly that I think they would like to drill. Which brings me to my conclusions. So IP effects are present in the data, and they will be present even more as we push towards lower base frequencies and higher dipole moments. As we understand better the IP effects and fixed-wing data, all these things will have us see and recognize more IP effects. And there was either present an opportunity or a problem, and I hope I convinced you that they are important and you need to deal with them. Careful with oversimplified airborne IP maps from contractors. I think some of them do offer some degree of airborne IP map. My understanding of what they do is that they take a lot of simplifications that, in my view, can actually be counterproductive because I think they will yield both false positive and false negatives. And in my view, robust assessment of IP effects should be carried out routinely on each and every airborne EM data set. As far as East Asia goes, I think preliminary results make us confident that there will be an improvement in the understanding of the regional geology and conductivity of the area. And I'll leave you with this question mark. You know, this is government survey. This is companies' interest in there. Given that all of this has got IP, I wonder if this one has it. This will be it. Thank you.